I'd like to move on to our next speaker, who is Mrs. Donna Nicolls. She has been involved in the fight and education of our community against domestic violence for many years. She is a senior director of the Crisis Center. She is involved in our counseling services and the work that we perform at the Crisis Center. So I'd like to call on Mrs. Donna Nicolls now to make the presentation on understanding the victim, another very important area.
Hi, good morning, everybody. It is my absolute pleasure, as usual, to present on the victim. Now, I'm doing a little bit more on this presentation. I'm trying to pull all of us in so we understand that we're all a part of this whole advocacy to help victims. So by the end of my short presentation, number one, I want us to consciously see the victim. And I'm using the term intimate partner violence because we're talking about behind closed doors. So I've used that, that definition. I want us to become aware of ways to be more supportive or supportive and more supportive of the victims. And for us to commit to the ongoing advocacy to protect the rights of victims and not just give lip service. I really want us to join the advocacy and want something better and want more the rights for the victims. So I want to start. It's an ancient parable. It's an ancient poem. I think I did it when I was in first or second form. That means I was 12, 11 or 12. And now I'm 67. So you know how long this poem has been there, and it's like from 18 something. But it's a poem that we can all identify with, and most of us may know it. And it's the poem about the blind man and an elephant. And what happened is that I adapted it because I don't want in any way to offend the community, our community of persons with disabilities. And so I want us to think about not as people who are impaired visually, but those of us who have on blindfolds. And we'll talk about what those blindfolds are. So what it is that there are 6 of us who encountered an elephant for the first time, but we have on blindfolds. And so the story goes that the first person touched the legs and stated it was a tree trunk. The second touched the tail and said it was a rope. The third person touched the air and said, my goodness, it's a fan. The fourth touched the trunk and declared it was a snake. The fifth touched the body and declared it was a wall. And the sixth blindfolded person touched the tusk and declared it was a spear. So all these assumptions and the drama around the assumptions when it really was an elephant. And so I'm using this analogy. When we see a victim, I want us to see the victim for who she is and not for the blindfolds that we have on that we're going to use to judge her, and that I want to continue with the presentation this morning. The second one is the victim figuratively. So who we don't see, because as I said, we are so blinded by our perceptions and misconceptions. And I want to also add our love for drama. Oh my goodness gracious, okay? So, and remember, drama conceals the truth, or we use drama because we want to run away from the truth. So we want to see the victim as she really is. So just a quick overview, because there's a part of this that is really important. Understanding violence continues to be a chosen resolution to conflicts, and it's a means to exert power and control over another person, which we know. But I want us to also remember this when we're in that judgment mode, that abusive relationships usually begin with little things and then increase gradually, often with dismissal comments that seem harmless, but are purposefully crafted to manipulate and ultimately control another person and diminish their sense of worth. And that's really what happens to a victim over time. And abuse actually is a behavioral choice. And as the commissioner, I just want to say, as the commissioner said, because in this, when he talked about how sometimes the police officers are frustrated, and there's no two ways about that. Yes, they are. But we must understand that by then, this person's sense of worth is so diminished that they really think that this abuser is their ticket to everything. And so we have to, when I say we need to see the victim, this is what I mean. And of course, who is a victim? Usually when I give this presentation and we're all in a room together, I say, look beside you, look left and right, look in front of you, look behind you, look on this Zoom if you're sharing this and seeing everybody, look at the Zoom people, whatever, I don't know how you call it, the screen. Persons in the mall, co-worker, people on the bus, in the gym, anyone, anywhere can be a victim. And might I also add, can be an abuser. There is no universal profile for a victim. And that's sometimes where we get really unhelpful dialogue, okay? Types of violence, and the police commissioner talked about that: physical, emotional, sexual, and we have social, emotional, environmental. And some of these things are easy for us to go and do some more research and see what they are. So I'm not going into those details. But we have to understand too that many forms of abuse are invisible to the eye. And the threshold for tolerance for the abuse will be different from each victim depending on a multiple of factors. It is as deep as it is wide. Okay. So we're going to just look at some signs of abuse. And I pull this down because it's limited time, but there are lots of others. So we're going to talk about first. The first one is really important because they become more isolated from family and friends. And this is a way that an abuser uses, like abuse 101. Just separate you from family and friends. Then you don't have anybody but the abuser. And because the family and friends don't understand and not really understanding the dynamics of what's happening, they just fall away too and don't understand that an abuser also grooms all of us. So when the victim talks about it, we say, can't be. No, not that person, So not enjoying activities that they used to enjoy, absences from work or school, spends excessive time with the other person. The commissioner said he's married so many years. I actually am married 42 years and I'm very close to my husband. We do a lot of things together, but we're not on top of each other, and so it's not like 24/7, we're just in each other's space. Khalil Gibran says, let there be space in your togetherness. But there are some abusers who just want to smother the victim and she has no outlet anywhere. It's just there. And it's just like I say too, that if somebody has to text you 10, 15, 20 times a day, that's stalking, not love. Okay, so that's just a little sideline. Afraid to displease, accusations of having affairs. Now that is classic 101 too, because it diverts from the behavior of the abuser. Personality changes, how they act or dress. Visibly physical injured with lame excuses, nervous and anxious, self-blame, subject to verbal put-downs and disrespect in front of others, and makes excuses for the behaviors of others. There are many more. I just tried to pull it down to things that we could relate to because these might be things that we see all the time. Okay. And then the effects of the abuse on the victim: diminished productivity at work, sense of hopelessness, sense of worthlessness, PTSD, physical health issues, panic attacks, substance abuse, and others. And so we have to know that this person is going through a lot, while this is happening. So let's talk about now, and I want to spend 2 minutes or so on this particular slide because it's really important. Why victims stay. And as we say, and when I used to give presentations, workshops to police officers years and years ago, during my early advocacy years. And, the police officers used to complain that they go, and the commissioner spoke about this, that they go on the scene and it's violent and they press the charges and they go to court. And lo and behold, the day of court, the victim is walking in with the abuser, hand in hand, smiling and everything and so on. And the police saying, what? But we have to remember that, people don't want a relationship to end. They want the abuse to stop. So when I say it's as deep as it's wide, and as Mrs. Christie says, sometimes it's even with intervention in a violent situation, it's 7 times going and coming and going and coming. Our job is to hold space and to be patient and not to say, you again? What? Our job is to say, if you come to me, I reach my hand out and I said, yes, I can help. If it's 50 times, yes, I can help. That's our job. That is our job. Okay? So there are many myths about intimate partner violence. The reasons for staying in abusive relationships are far more complex than they appear and not necessarily indicative of the victim's character or strength of will. Let's see her. Let's consciously see her. Some of the reasons are fear. Oh, many, 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 many ways of fear, years ago, I had a lady who her husband had a gun in her, let's put it that way. Okay. And so there are things that happen that are very dire. Lack of resources means to support herself and family. And that is, she could be working. It's not like somebody is totally dependent, but like with the commissioner talked about, this lady, her children are in school. She could help, but she can't do everything. She needed the help. And so for me, I don't know the law. So, I'm just making a suggestion as a layperson. In that case, if the husband was going to be removed from the thing, I don't know if the law could say, okay, a part of his salary would be allotted. What he would normally do to pay the school fees would still do it. I don't know. I'm just throwing something out there. So don't get on me and say, you're stupid, because I'm just throwing it out there. Okay. Lack of support services or poor response by support services and authority. That has improved tremendously, but we still have a long way to go. Unsupportive family and friends. And that's the same thing. The family say, she don't want our help because we're telling her to come. She don't want to come, or she comes and she goes back and so on. We have to see, please, the victim as she is. Societal apathy, traditional thinking, till death do you part. But death don't have to be a physical death, Death means death of the relationship. Death inside. I feel dead inside in this relationship. So it has ended. And so we have to get out of that traditional thinking and, have some new thought. Let's put it that way. Fear of losing the children. Limited resources for short-term emergency housing and no long-term transitional housing. Now, you could challenge that because I'm not sure. It might have changed now. So somebody from social services may say to me, no, Donna, we now have long-term transitional housing, which I would hope. But as far as I'm concerned, there's none, but they could be, or limited. Maybe I should have put limited. Victims' lack of knowledge of and or access to safety and support, not really knowing what to do, where to go, who to go to. And societal factors. I have to put this one in because it's very important. And remember now, I support healthy relationships. I am totally in support of healthy marriages and healthy relationships, okay? But there's a societal factor that teaches women to believe their identities and feeling of self-worth are contingent on getting and keeping a man. And we have to really move away from that. But it comes with each person being confident about themselves, confident in the relationship that really is complementary and not hierarchical, not one above the other, but it's the both of us walking side by side towards our best good. And that's what a healthy relationship looks like. And that's what we're trying to promote. So this slide on why victims stay is really, really critical. And we have to remember it's as deep as it's wide. Very, very important, okay? So let's identify our blindfolds, because no matter what I said before, if you're still blinded, then you're not going to you're not going to be able to see or hear. What are your biases? What makes you biased? The challenge is to look at the public list, the published list of IPV or domestic violence myths, and challenge your belief when you're more informed. So you're going to actually look now at what your biases are. How do you discriminate? Color, class, nationality, faulty assumptions, religion. They shouldn't even be here. Look how she talk. Look how he smell. Da 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 da. This is somebody who is reaching out for help. And all you can think about is how they sound, whether they should be here or not, whether they were wearing something, whether they shouldn't be where they are. This good. Okay, I think I've said enough there. Measure your intolerance level and see what internal work you need to do. Because a lot of times when we stand in judgment, it's really because we don't want to face what we ourselves are doing, what we fear, so we project it, okay? Time to evaluate your judge and jury verdicts. Okay, we are so judgmental. And so what I want to ask you is, what beam do you need to remove from your eye? Let's sit there one little second. What beam do you need to remove from your eye when you're looking at this person? So moving right along. What do survivors of domestic violence, intimate partner abuse want? They want to be safe. They want to be believed, taken seriously, and respected. Yes, even if it's the 7th or the 10th time. Interventions that help to build self-esteem and provide information for empowerment. Support system to help them through this experience. Options based on their circumstances, explain to them clearly and honestly. And I just need to say there, because sometimes when a person comes in, I'm saying, you know, we can't take you out of that house. There is no other way. So perhaps your best thing is to get a protection order. So it's really communicating what we can do and what we cannot do. We cannot promise somebody what we can't deliver on, because this person is already in a very vulnerable position. It's very important that we understand that. And we need to support to cope with the effects of the abuse on their children. And so your role, our role, if we know somebody or suspect that they're in an abusive relationship, we have to be supportive and not judgmental. We have to encourage them to disclose to a confidant. We need to share factual information with them, brochures, pamphlet, websites. There was a case, this is very many years ago, that a lady came in, and I had given her a brochure, and I went downstairs from the crisis center to get another brochure. When I came back into the counseling room, she was visibly upset, and she was upset with me. She says, "You didn't tell me he came here. You didn't tell me he was here. You didn't tell me that you spoke with him." And she was so upset. And I said, "Ma'am, no, what happened?" She was looking at the pamphlet and the things that we wrote, that they say, how we love you, or we'll never do this again, and so on. She thought that it was because her husband had come in and told us those things, not seeing that it was a brochure based on facts, based on research. And so we give pamphlets so she can understand and say, oh, it's not just me. This is something that happens to others. And then we're able to do some more work, some good work, because she understood that. So encourage them to reestablish relationships with family and friends. Okay, so really and truly, we're trying to help them to be more of who they are. So how can you help? Start by believing that this is a real problem in the lives of many victims. Educate yourself about domestic violence and intimate partner violence. Help create an environment in which the victims feel comfortable talking about the abuse. Be careful of the language that you use when talking to the victims. Be very careful of that language. Know how to ask the right questions to let the victim know that you're there for them, you're understanding, you have empathy. But you also have to explain the limits of confidentiality, because as we know, and I'm sure most of this audience will know, if they disclose the abuse of a minor or they disclose that they may hurt themselves or others, then we're mandated to report that. And we have to say that up front. Be aware of support services that are available locally and keep supplies of information to pass on. Be aware of signs that could indicate domestic abuse is taking place. Validate and support victims who do reveal abuse. Encourage the victim, I just said that, but this is important to reestablish ties with family and friends. Encourage the victim to seek counseling. Sometimes we have to help them to develop a safety plan. Sometimes it's to seek legal counsel. Ensure confidentiality. If you need to share the information with other agencies, follow the guidelines and be honest and upfront with the victim. And so you also may want to assist the victim in finding employment or training in job skills or requalifying training so that she can become self-assured and become economically independent. And this way she can gain more faith in her own abilities. So it's really about empowerment of that person. Safety planning, just quickly, I'll just talk about a few things. You can find this on many websites, crisis center website. Photocopy all important documents and give them to somebody to keep. Get new prescriptions for essential medication, cut keys for house, vehicle, office, leave money, clothes, and so on with a trusted friend, have a code system with a neighbor or friend, find out about legal matters, let the school know that you're having problems just in case, because sometimes the children act up and so on and so forth. There can be others. The crisis center response, we've always been advocates for victims, always. Our advocacy never stops. So our group, our administrator, our director, and all the volunteers, we have just over the years worked tirelessly just to help the community to be more aware. And now what we're saying is that we want you to be more aware. We want you to be into an action mode. Victim support, we have a 24-hour hotline, we have a counseling clinic, we do educational workshops, we collaborate with other stakeholders, we have volunteer training, we have information on our website that you can download and print and share. Challenges, societal apathy towards intimate partner violence. I don't know what else to say. Societal norms that still enable abusers who are often excused from taking responsibility for their actions. We do that. And so we need to stop that. Impunity for offenders, we talked about that. Lack of shelters, lack of collaboration between stakeholders. We do collaborate. I'm not saying that we don't, but we need to be, it has to be more. I want to ask you to describe in detail an experience you might have had as a victim. Car was stolen, somebody could have hit you, somebody could have called your name, whatever, when you felt violated, stole some money from you, whatever. So what happened? What did you think about while it was happening? Who did you tell? Who did you consciously not tell? How did you feel? What did you do? What were the immediate after effects? What were the long-term effects? And what is it like to remember it now? Put yourself in a position where you felt like a victim. We're trying to create some empathy here. So there are many resources. The Crisis Center, the Child Abuse Hotline, the police, and I don't have this up, but I could have. Call a family member, see a counselor, psychologist, see the HR manager at work, speak with a priest or pastor. So how does counseling and support help? What do we do to help to enable the victim? Well, my aim as a counselor when I'm encountering a victim is to help them to become victorious over the trauma, to help them to work through the trauma. We don't forget things, forget and move on. No, that is very, very, very mean. We don't forget things. But when we experience trauma, it has power over us. So we said before, there are different ways that it affects us and has control over us. The thinking about it, the feeling that comes with it, and so on. So in the counseling, what we're trying to do is minimize the effect that the trauma has on the victim. And so afterwards, after we've been in session and worked through whatever comes up and so on, it has no longer the power it had before. She remembers, but it doesn't have the power over her that it used to have. So it's a memory, something that you didn't want to happen, but it no longer has the power over you. Our collective job is to remove the blindfolds, drop the drama, and hold space for the victim as they traverse this journey back to wholeness. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that powerful presentation, Donna.
You're most welcome. Yes.